Kathleen Wiley, and I'm here with Deborah Henson-Conant, a composer, mentor, um, terrific harpist. We both play the harp. That's why we call this Jung and Harp. This is episode number 135, and today we're talking about jumping into the abyss. How far down is it really? And you can tell I'm a little bit rattled from our even having this as a topic. I got a little bit like, what am I supposed to say? So, how far
So
down is it, DHC?
right, exactly. Well, this conversation that we have every week started in a car years ago when Kathleen was hosting me on a tour that I was doing. And I loved the conversation so much, and we both did, that we wanted to continue it and to continue it with you. So we're not here to tell you anything, but we're here to explore and we're here to share the experience of conversation. So we invite you into the conversation as well. If you're somewhere watching this or listening to this where you can comment, and we're doing it live, we invite you to comment. And we will actually get to read what you say. So this all started where I was in a weekend workshop where we were looking at the conversations. We were looking at something called automatic recurring dialogues in our life, where we keep seeing something over and over and over again. And we were looking back at where this started, where we first experienced this. And I discovered one I knew, but I'd never really realized how it was playing out in my life all along. So when I was about 5, my mother started dating. She was a single mother, and she started dating, and my new stepfather and my mother and I were out for a walk one day. I loved walking on walls. I just loved this. And we came to this huge wall, and I was like, put me up on the wall. And my soon to be stepfather was, no, I'm not going to put you up on the wall. And he probably said something else. I don't know what he said. And I was like, no, I got to be on the wall. This is a big wall. I got to be on the top of this wall. And he was like, no, no. And I was like, dude, please. And he was like, okay. And I just want to point out here, I hadn't thought this before. This man actually was in school at that time to be a child psychologist. Just saying this. Anyway, I don't think that has anything to do with the story. So finally, he lifts me up. He puts me on this beautiful, amazing wall. I get up to the top of the wall. I look over, and there is this sheer cliff to nowhere. Like at the very bottom is this raging river, and it's forever down. And I'm terrified. And like he takes me off. And that, I think, has played over in my life over and over, to where I don't trust myself to want. I don't trust that once I get what I want, it won't be this sheer abyss that's gonna where I'm gonna fall off. Now, when we talked about this morning, you said something about there being a net, and I was like, a net? Never occurred to me. And over the weekend, I also thought, it didn't occur to me to be exhilarated and ask him to hold my hand. I was just scared. I walked on walls all the time, but suddenly I was seeing the magnificence and where I actually was, how high I was.
Yeah.
Whoa, Miss Jungian analyst. Wait a minute. You're the Jungian analyst, right? Is it analyst?
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. So, Miss Jungian analyst, analyze that.
Well, I think we got to this because you and I were talking about, which we've talked about for a long time, is taking our Young at Heart series to the next level to make it more available to more people. And you said, you were asking about a mentor. And I said, I don't think we need a mentor. I think we just need to take action. And it prompted this fear for you, this experience where when you took action, you got what you wanted, that it was terrifying because it really wasn't safe to be up on that wall. And, these are the kinds of things that can interfere with our doing something that's perfectly reasonable and safe in the world, is that our desires get mixed up with, I'm just going to call it survival fear. And,
Mm,
and we get terrified that if I do that thing, that I'm going to die. And it's not that we literally are thinking that. It's not that we're even cognitively having that thought, but it's that feeling, it's that terror of annihilation. And, this, we can get into another whole dimension of this, because we could look, the fear of falling is what the psychoanalyst Winnicott talked about as a primitive agony. That's a state of body sensation and a state of felt experience left in the body for adults when, as children, very young children, infants, toddlers age, they were not given the containment or holding they needed when they did have needs. So when they expressed their needs, they were left too long without those needs being met. And so that it sets in motion within the physical structure, physiology of the body, this sense of just falling forever. And people get terrified of falling forever. So that's another place where this kind of fear comes in.
I want to ask you two things about that, and then I want to ask
Yeah.
you about the resolution of it. So one of the things in The Golden Cage, my musical, which came out this year, and which is sort of the dream of my life that I had, that I've been living, sort of the epitome, the autobiography of my internal life. The thing that happens in the middle of the show, the thing that causes the transformation of the character, is that she gets pushed off a cliff that she's been on the top of forever. And she requests to be pushed off. And then she really thinks she's going to die. There is death in front of her, staring in her face. And that's when she surrenders. And by surrendering, opens her arms and her body remembers that she actually has the ability to fly. And so there's that. And I was talking to one of my coaches a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying, well, you want to get out there on the skinny branches. And I was like, wait, what? No, I said, no, I don't want to get on the skinny branches. That is dumb. The skinny branches are where you're going to fall. And she said, well, no, that's where you realize that when you start falling, that you're going to fly. So very poetic, but is it true?
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's true. I know that when we hit a situation where we're out of our realm, that's when new possibilities open up to us. I know that. I've seen that.
True. And sometimes we take that leap and our ego does die, because sometimes it doesn't go the way the ego wanted it to, and we get egg on our face. But the problem comes in there from the Jungian perspective, is we're identified with the sense of self, that ego consciousness, who we think we are, versus the larger self, who holds far more possibilities of who we are than we know. And so sometimes we may want something from an ego persona driven way, and we go for it and we splat on the surface. We don't get it. And we feel like we've splatted, we've hit the concrete. But what I know as a Jungian psychoanalyst is that it's in those moments that there's probably some dominant attitude of the ego that's been holding you back, that needed to die. And that if you can undergo that symbolic death, that death of the sense of who you think you are, to move into connection to the larger self that holds all possibilities, then it's like the phoenix rising from the ashes, which, your beautiful song about the phoenix.
Yeah, you're making me want to play that song more. You're making me think of something that I've talked to students about, and something that I experienced. So when I don't know if, I don't even think the harp is on right now,
Okay.
but I'll put it on. But when improvising, and we didn't test to make sure the harp is working, but let me just try it anyway, whatever. Improvising, I'm always improvising on chords and shapes, and sometimes jazz tunes. And at a certain point, I was saying to myself, if only I could actually play what I hear in my head, is going to be so good. Because I don't. I just play shapes. I'm playing the gesture of this movement, and not a specific note. I don't hear that before. If I were singing, I would be, I would be singing in a different way. And I thought, like, if only I could get it exactly the way that I'm imagining it. And one day I did. I actually played what I heard in my head, and I was like, this is going to be great. And I go and I listen back to it, and it isn't. It's
Right.
very predictable. And I see this with students all the time in the academy, that they're thinking that they cannot improvise, when in fact it's really just gesture and shape, or it can be
Hmm.
gesture and shape,
Hmm.
with into which we then put our character and feel our character. And it doesn't always work the first time or the second or whatever, but eventually we get comfortable with it.
Right.
So wait a minute, what am I saying here, Kathleen? What am I trying to say? Help.
Well, I think that what you may be trying to say is that for some people, improvisation on the harp or another instrument can feel like jumping into the abyss, and that there's nothing that's going to catch you. And that in truth, there is the equivalent of the net, I said, would be on the other side of the bridge to catch you, or the net to catch us if we jump into
Right,
the abyss. That the shapes that you're playing become what catch you. That's where the energy holds you.
right.
And you know,
Hmm. And it's
so
interesting because right now in the academy, every quarter we have a different focus. And this focus is structure is freedom. And that's part of just what I believe, that structure is the foundation of creative freedom. Without that, we don't have that wall to walk on, or I mean,
or
but
the
that,
net to catch you.
or the net to
Yeah.
yes. Although it's interesting as we start going into those analogies, because the net to catch us, in what I see in improvisation, the structure and the shapes, that's the structure, and the net is time. Keep going. As
Oh,
you keep
interesting.
going,
Hmm.
it there's nothing to fall off of if you stay on the time. It's only if you think there's something to fall off of and you stop that you can fall. Like,
Right, right. Yeah, that's interesting. So you're talking about continuing to move. You
right,
saw
right,
you labeled it time, but what saves you, so to speak, the net is the movement forward, the continuing
right,
to walk.
right. Whoa.
Um, is the
Okay.
is yeah.
So now what I'm seeing and what you're saying is that is also the net with, something we try to do that we think, because you're right, every time, and this is what happened as a child, I stopped, take me off this.
Right,
And then that started projecting into my life forward.
right.
When things start getting too high, or I look over the edge and I see there's this big thing, then I stop.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about even what we've been talking about, because we've been talking about for the last year and a half at least, taking Young at Heart to the next level,
Yep.
so it would be more public for people and more accessible. So in a way, we've moved some, we'll move, and then we stop moving in that direction.
Right,
And
right.
so it's the movement. And according to Jung, he has this wonderful little essay called um, what's the title? Psychological Factors in Psyche. And he's talking about psychological factors, and he's talking about instincts. And one of the instincts he says is drive to activity or movement. That's an instinct. And so that we need that, the drive to activity, to keep moving, and that movement is what ultimately takes us somewhere else and catches us. Yeah.
There's we've got a big
Oh.
comment here, so let's bring it in. This is from Facebook
Ah.
user. There was a song called Fear of Falling by a singer-songwriter, Darren Hayes. And one of the lines reads, a fear of what the truth sees. That
Mm.
sums up how I feel about jumping into the abyss sometimes. That as I go deeper, I'm reading this, it's so beautiful. I feel like
Yeah.
singing, and deeper, and peel the layers of the onion, I might see the truth, which might not be what I wanted to see. But I think jumping into the abyss is a process of discovery. And
Yeah.
it is okay if things do not work out the way we preferred all the time. Agreed. Agreed.
Yes.
That if things worked out the way I preferred, I would be in a totally different life that would not have the surprises and the wonderment
Right.
that my life has.
Right.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
Kathleen, this tell me about this. You were just talking. How do we get back? I'll figure that. You were talking about this little pamphlet, or this thing that Jung
oh,
wrote.
it's
It
a
was,
little essay he wrote, Psychological Factors. I forget the title.
or
I think it's in volume 8 of his collected works. But he says that there are 5 psychological factors that he talks about: hunger, sexuality, drive to activity or movement, self-reflection, and creativity. And
uh-huh.
I want to say something that, in reference to what the Facebook user shared, and thank you for that because you summed it up beautifully.
Yeah, beautiful.
Is that if we're going to ever know parts of ourselves, including the parts of ourselves that are ugly or the parts of ourselves that don't have the skills that we want to have, we have to be willing to see the truth. And so sometimes the fear that holds us back and what feels like the jumping into the abyss is,
Mm.
if I put myself out there, will it really matter? Will anybody pay attention? Will my colleagues and friends think it's bunk? Will other people judge it as wrong or bad? And so the jumping into the
Mm.
abyss is really jumping into the unknown. And, in truth, again, in terms of our cycles of growth, sometimes when we hit the truth, it can feel like a death. It can feel like an annihilation to who we think we are. And it is. And that is the part of the process of transformation. It's part of the process of fully embodying the essence that we are.
As you were talking about these friends, the death of the ego, I was thinking in that scenario, we've lost the joy of discovery. And it's making me think about what I'm, and it's making me think, well, that a lot of times once we start seeing ourselves as experts, or we think we're supposed to be good at something, that starts to disappear, that joy of discovery, that joy of being a first, learning something just for the joy of it, like getting a new toy, enjoying a new toy. And it's reminding me of what I've made a commitment to do this January. So I have a class, this Strings of Passion, the 7 Principles of
Mhm.
Creative Resonance. And for years, I've been teaching it to harp players within the realm of harp and harp music. But I've always known that it's for a larger public, that
Mhm.
it's the principles of creativity that anyone can use. And one of the ideas that I had was then to reach out to other people, like in the culinary arts and landscape design and fashion and painting and whatever, and get prompts that the lay people can use, just like there
Mhm.
are prompts that lay people, whatever, that lay people in music. There's an access point to the experience of artistry and the opportunity of discovery, even when they're
Mhm.
like, if like to anyone who doesn't play the harp, I could show you those access points so that you would have the experience and the discovery of being able to feel like you're playing music without ever having to worry about going to Carnegie Hall. And
Mhm.
I was thinking that, and that's what I want to be able to do with that course, not just in music, but in every part of life, so that I can start engaging in the joy of discovery of every part of my life, instead of feeling like I have to have mastery or excellence. Why can I not have the joy of discovery? No, and what does this have to do with abysses? And I don't know. I don't know.
Well, but I think to have the joy of discovery, you have to risk going into the abyss, because sometimes we go into the unknown and, we do, like, I write something or I record myself playing something on the harp, and then I go back and read it or I listen to it and I think, oh God, oh, you know. So part of the joy of discovery means being willing to risk hearing, seeing the truth that, oh man, this isn't up to the standards I want, or gosh, that's pretty convoluted, or wow, but to do it, it's the paradox, is to be able to see that without judging oneself as bad, wrong, unworthy, or unvaluable. That the paradox is when we can see, oh, God, okay, yeah, so yeah, I can see how that was way too wordy, or I can see how that was a bag ass words, pardon me for saying way of saying something, and I can say it much more clearly than that. That we have to be able to see the truth without it uh, we have to not stay identified with the feeling crushed that we're not who we think we are.
Okay, I hear you, and I'm going to propose, because I just tried this the other night. I wanted to try to learn to do something to scat sing with the harp, and I proposed to myself that I would record and I would listen and only look for what I loved,
Mm.
ignoring everything else, going for what I loved and letting that guide me.
Hmm.
And so now you're making me think that also this is something that I want to bring into this course to actually teach myself and others how to guide by that.
Absolutely. When we start with what we know, and I'm always saying to the people in my embodiment circle, we have to start where we are, which means knowing what's going on in our body.
Mm,
If we don't know what's going
right,
on in our body, and
right.
even in music, if we're not in our body and really listening, not only with this ear, but listening with the inner ear of the that we might say is the inner
Right,
ear of the heart to
right.
what we want to express, there we'll never get to artistry, right? Artistry
That's
comes from
right. And if
within.
we're constantly covering up just the little tiny voice of what we love, we won't hear it.
Right,
We won't be able to be guided by it. And
right.
Facebook user is saying, a mentor of mine taught me to be curious, which I found to be an essential mindset for discovery. And
Yes.
that's right. If we're thank you, if we are constantly being guided by criticism, which is just a learn, we've learned how to do that, and it's much easier than being curious, because you're right. If I'd gone up on the top of that wall and I'd said, new dad to be, hold my hand, and mom hold his hand. I want to see what this looks like from up
Right.
here.
Yeah.
It might have been a different life. I mean, it might have been a different, it's not that I'm gonna create less, but I might, that's the life that I commit to living from here on, is what I'm saying. The one in which I stand on the top of that wall and I look down.
With holding hands to the larger self, the power
Right.
greater than the self within you. And sometimes that we access that through holding hands with each other, which we do almost every week. And with those of you
Right.
who join in, we hold hands and say,
Yeah.
let's go
Yeah. That's
explore.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Which brings us to, it's time to end.
Yeah.
And, but, and we will meet again next week
Yes.
for another adventure, holding hands and looking into that place of curiosity and beauty, and that we haven't gone before,
Right.
and that we can go together.
Right.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you for everyone who joined us in this moment, that when we're giving this and when we're sharing this with you, and you're sharing with us, and also afterwards. Thank you, and go forth and harp on curiosity.